Wednesday night. At least it's cool in here. It got a little hot out here today, but hey, we've been missing it. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you to Julia Shanks for coming out tonight. I also want to say thank you to Peter Coppola as a representative of the Burlington Community Victory Garden. He's got some information on the table. Dave Dumaras of Farmer Dave's CSA out of Draycott. Michelle Snyder from Leahy Health. And Kelly Lehman from the Rec Department with information about the Burlington Farmers Market. We also owe a great big thank you to the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce Charitable Foundation and Leahy Hospital and Medical Center and People Helping People for sponsoring this night. I've been very passionate about local foods for a number of years now. I've been a member of Dave's CSA, I think, for 7 years. I've been the coordinator of the Burlington site for about 6 years. And I know that at the beginning of that season, you were just so excited to see what's in the bin today. It's like Christmas morning, opening up that bin when you first pick it up. And then, you know, a couple of months in, you're like, oh, what am I going to do with this chaos? So I'm very excited tonight to learn some tips from Julia about what to do with all this local seasonal food. I did have a new for me this year, right about February, when I'd used up all the vegetables from my late fall share. It dawned on me, I didn't know how to go to the grocery store to shop for my food. I was so used to cooking all my meals based on what was in that bin that I didn't know, I'd forgotten how to plan ahead. And that was a new realization for me, but luckily, the spring share started early in March, and so I was back on track. I want to bring up Wendy. She's one of my volunteers at the food pantry, and she was the one that made the contact with Julie. Julia, she's a friend of hers, and so Wendy's actually going to do the introduction of Julia. Thank you so much for coming.
I am thrilled to be in my community and to introduce you to a true Renaissance woman. This woman not only graduated from Hampshire College, but also from the California Culinary School in San Francisco. And then it wasn't quite enough and went on to Babson College and did an MBA in entrepreneurial studies. And then, after having worked for more than 10 years in restaurants and having this passion for business and for seeing dreams be created into reality, has become a consultant and works with locally sustainable people within the food world, and Farmer Dave being one of them. And so this food passion is something that began when she was still a child, and I am very excited tonight to introduce my friend Julia Shanks, who's going to share some tips and do a little cooking for us. And then, if you would like, she has a brand new cookbook that will be for sale for a special discounted price tonight. We are privileged to have a 20% discount for those attending this event. So, without further ado, Julia Shanks.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Just to give a little more background, I'm going to share with you 25 tips for going local without going crazy. And when I came out with this book, and you go on a book tour and you give talks, it's kind of hard to do a reading of recipes. It's like, okay, we'll saute a half an onion, and add a cup of wine, and it doesn't make for much of a book reading to read recipes. So I came up with these 25 tips for going local without going crazy. So I started cooking when I was 12. And one of my first jobs out of cooking school was at a restaurant in DC called Restaurant Nora. And this was 20 years ago or so. And this, long before farm to table was farm to table. It was, you know, it wasn't even a movement yet, but here was this woman that bought her tomatoes from this guy and the chickens from that guy, and she had her mushroom guy, and we had a butcher in the back because she got whole animals in. You didn't just buy, you know, tenderloins, you got whole animals and you break it down. And my boss there was a gentleman, the executive chef was Brett Groscal, who is my co-author, and we both left in 97, and he bought 100 acres in southern Maryland and started farming, and I moved to Boston to become a chef. So I worked in Boston as a chef for 10 years, or 50, I don't know how many, I can't even, I stopped counting. So I worked as a chef for a few years, and together we collaborated on this cookbook. It started out actually as a way to help his CSA subscribers. So, you know, you talk about what do you do with all that kale. Where's Jane? You're talking about what to do with all that kale, and you know, it's kale, Swiss chard, and kohlrabi, and it's like, if I get another bunch of, you know, I'm gonna go crazy. And so that's, you know, that was actually how this book came to be, was trying to figure out, you know, everybody knows how to cook tomatoes, but it's just these other things that, especially that what grows in New England isn't particularly easy. So I am gonna just read to you a little bit from the introduction, and then I'm going to prepare for you, while I'm going over my 25 tips for going local without going crazy, I'm going to prepare a chickpea crepe, and I'm going to stuff it with wilted spinach from Farmer Dave. And if we have time and the mood strikes us, I also I made a salad dressing to go with some of his beautiful mesclun, so we'll see how the timing goes. We'll see what. So anyway, no matter where you live, eating seasonally and locally offers a different way of thinking about food. While some areas of North America are relatively blessed to have locally grown fruits and vegetables for longer seasons, even these regions have strong seasonality as to when each type of produce is at its best. Locally sourced and seasonally raised foods taste better and are better for you. They spend more time in the fields ripening, developing sweetness and flavor, because they don't need to be picked underripe for shipping. Picking underripe vegetables also reduces the nutritional value. Farmers can grow more diverse varieties bred for quality and flavor rather than long shelf life. And though a region may experience a drought or unusually cold weather, the fruits and vegetables still grow at their optimal time, ensuring the best possible taste. Buying local also benefits the environment and the economy. When we reduce our food miles, the distance our food travels from farm to table, we reduce our carbon footprint, the impact of transportation, refrigeration, and packaging needed to carry produce around the country. With each local food purchase, you ensure that more of your food dollars goes to the farmers and to our local economy and our community. In Massachusetts, if every family spent $12 during the typical growing season, over $200 million would be reinvested in our local communities and into our local farmland. The benefits of going all local can be enormous, and it's one of those things that, you know, everybody talks about going local and how great it is, but there are limits. And I don't expect anybody to make a wholesale change, and certainly I don't expect anybody to give up coffee and chocolate. It's just not practical. But if you can make one or two changes, then that's terrific. So I'm going to just go ahead and start making the chickpea crepes. Have you guys ever cooked with chickpea flour? No, okay. So chickpea flour is ground garbanzo beans, and you may see it as garbanzo bean flour, chickpea flour, graham flour. It's got many different names. But I'm going to make a batter, and I'm going to use both chickpea flour and regular flour. And who here has made pancakes? So this actually came from Whole Foods, and but I can almost guarantee that you're going to find this at Demula's, at Market Basket as well. Oh yeah, yep. I'm sorry? Yeah, I've never been to Wegmans, but oh good. And then and actually in my neighborhood in Cambridge, there's a lot of Indian grocers, and so it's typical in a lot of Indian cuisine as well. So my first tip of going local without going crazy is probably the most obvious and easy, and that's to shop at the farmers market. And it sounds like you guys have a great farmers market in Burlington, and it opens June 16th on Thursday at 2 p.m. and at 2:30, excuse me. 2:30 to 6:30, and where is it? Oh, awesome. It's right here on the town common. How great is that? But if you don't live in Burlington, and I know a few of you are not in Burlington, there's the Massachusetts Federation of Farmers Markets has a website, and I can never remember if it's FMFM or Farm Mass Federation or Google Massachusetts Federation of Farmers Markets. They have a website, and they'll tell you all the different farmers markets in Massachusetts. You can search by Eastern Massachusetts. You can also search by the day of the week. So you can usually find a farmers market available any day of the week. Here, my eggs. You can't make crepes without eggs or milk. There we go. Okay. So when you get to the farmer's market, you want to walk around because, you know, when you're cooking seasonally, you can't necessarily plan ahead. You don't know what's going to be available. You know, I went to the farmer's market on Monday to, you know, see what was going to be available for today, and it's like, oh, we've got kale, and we got radishes, and we got salad. And then you can plan your menu, but it's hard. When you cook seasonally, you have to kind of turn around the usual way of thinking about food. You don't plan a menu, you go to the market and then see what you have, and then you plan. So it's kind of the reverse way of thinking. So, and these crepes are actually really good for this time of year when we're inundated with greens, and I think it's very easy to get overwhelmed with greens pretty quickly. So let's see. So for the crepe batter, you want to whisk together the two kinds of flour. Can you guys see? It's really not that interesting at this point, it's just flour. And I'm going to add a little bit of salt. And then I'm just going to add enough milk and 1 egg to make it a nice consistency. So tip number 3. Oh, you know what? Can't always make it to the farmer's market, and talking about, you know, learning how to shop again. And if you can't go to the farmer's market, then you can still shop at the local markets. I mean, Demoulas, or do you guys call it Demoulas or Market Basket? Okay, I know one person in here still says Demoulas. Does anybody else? Okay. I'm actually using half milk and half water because just to keep it a little bit lighter, but you could certainly do all milk or all water depending on your dietary preferences. The nice thing about Market Basket is that they actually are buying from local farmers, and they're locally owned. So, you know, being local isn't just about eating locally, but it's also supporting the local markets. And, you know, Market Basket is here. So, you know, if you can't go to the farmer's market and shop directly from the farmer, buy from a company that's based in Massachusetts, and all those dollars are going to stay in Massachusetts. So I'm a big fan of, you know, shopping at local markets as opposed to, you know, national chains, but when you can. Tip number 4 is to eat in restaurants that support local agriculture. And I have to say, I was looking online to see which restaurants in the Burlington area support local farmers. Do you know?
Bancroft does.
Bancroft?
Nino's does.
Oh, great. Oh, good.
Nino's? It's up at 3rd Avenue.
There's also an organization called Chefs Collaborative, and it might take a while for the pans to heat up, so I'll just keep talking. Oh, I did a cooking demo the other day, and I was like, is it hot? Is it hot? And then it's like full on.
It was hot.
It was, but it didn't blister, so that was good.
That is good.
Yeah, I don't think you can blister the palm of your hand. but I don't know. So if there's a website, an organization called Chefs Collaborative, and it's a organization that works with the chefs to help them source locally. So obviously there's two parts to this equation. There's you as a consumer buying locally for all the groceries that you cook at home, and then there's the chefs when you go out to eat, and they're buying locally as well. So when you can support a restaurant that's shopping locally, you can sort of do it from both angles of where you're getting your food. And Chefs Collaborative has a list of restaurants, and also dyinggreen.org or com. There's another website, Dying Green, also. Tip number 5, avoid processed foods. If you're eating processed foods, I can almost assure you, you are not eating locally. So I did actually make a few crepes earlier today because I didn't know how many people were going to show up, and I was thinking that watching me cook 20 crepes would be really boring. So I did make a few already, but I'm going to show you how to make crepes as soon as my pan gets hot. We've got plenty of time. Nobody's in a rush, right? There are companies, they're called aggregators, or some people, the technical term is called food hub, which honestly it makes no sense to me because I think of a food hub as a place, not as a company. But there's a company called Boston Organics. There's also a company called Farmers to You, and they're basically sourcing from the local farmers for you. So even if you can't get to the farmers market, you can still, buy from a market that's sourcing directly from the local farmers. Farmers to You is based in Vermont, so they drive all around Vermont, and then they drive into Boston twice a week, and they actually deliver too, which is really nice. It can be said that eating locally is not necessarily more economical. And we can discuss whether that's true or not. I mean, perhaps a pound of spinach at the supermarket that came from California is going to be less than a pound of spinach from Farmer Dave. But part of the challenge for local farmers in New England is that everybody's growing on a small scale, and when you grow on a small scale, you can't get the efficiencies and the economies. It's interesting. I worked with a farmer out in Concord who is used to selling wholesale, and he could work his whole fields by himself because all he had to do was run one tractor down 5 fields, and he didn't have to change any of the settings on his tractor, just to go right down the field. And when you're doing small-scale diversified farming, most of it's manual labor. It's hard to get the efficiencies of big machines. And it's just more expensive to work at that scale than, at the California scale. So things tend to be more expensive. Pastured meat, you need more land, and land is more expensive here. And, and there's a whole another issue with meat in terms of the processing of meat. And I don't even want to go down that digression. But at any rate, so the point of the story is that sometimes eating locally can feel like it's more expensive, but you can eat on a budget. First of all, you can eat the whole vegetable. Things like turnip greens or beet greens, you can cook them. Actually, there's a recipe in the book for turnip green soup. With it's kind of a variation on the white bean and sausage. I think it's an Italian white bean sausage soup with turnip greens instead of kale. You can eat the whole vegetable, and I think we kind of get used to sort of pitching parts, and you don't have to. Ooh, it's hot. All right, so let's see how well this works. So this is a 3-ounce ladle, and this is I think this is an 8-inch pan, and that's kind of the right size. Well, maybe it isn't hot. It's smoking like it's hot, but it's not sizzling like it's hot. Good thing I made extras earlier today. All right, we'll see how this goes. It's always an experiment. And actually this just goes to show how versatile this recipe is, that you can be on a cooktop that doesn't heat very well or takes a while and smokes and isn't hot or something, and it's still going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Another way on a budget is to subscribe to a CSA. CSAs, and I think Farmer Dave, I might give you the moment to sort of talk about CSAs, but it's a nice way. You get, it costs $25, $30 a week. And so, for example, this week for $30, you got 2 bags of lettuce, 5 apples, a pound or 2 pounds of tomatoes, a bunch of basil, a bunch of cilantro, and 2 gallons of spinach. That's a lot of produce. And it's actually going to last the entire week, as opposed to the spinach that you got or the salad mix you got from the supermarket that wilts after 2 days because it was shipped from California. So one, it's actually an economical way to eat locally, and a lot of times farms will let you volunteer as a way to get a reduction. Do you do volunteer? Come on. A little bit more. So obviously one of the best ways to cook on a budget is to cook at home. Cooking at home, just I don't have a lot to say about it, but it's cheaper than going out, I can assure you that. When you're on a budget, storing your produce well is paramount because, I was just reading an article today, I was just sharing with Wendy about Americans typically throw away about 25% of their groceries. That it's like if you go to the supermarket and you have 4 bags, you might as well just dump 1 in the trash before you even leave the park. It's terrible, but it's like, and I'm guilty of this too. If you called me up tomorrow night and said, hey, let's go out for dinner, and even though I'd bought all this food to cook, I'd go out for dinner with you because that sounds, yeah, exactly. You see what I'm saying? And then all the produce that I had bought would go away. But if you're storing your produce well, then it just means you're getting that much more life out of what you're buying. So, I'm sorry?
Into the freezer.
Yes, actually, yoo-hoo! Yes, I freeze so much. I don't know, depending on the, where you live and how much space you have, I actually have a freezer in my basement. But, some of the things that I freeze, for example, basil, I'll put a whole bunch right in the freezer. I don't actually make a pesto. I know a lot of people make pesto. But I find that I like to keep the flavor clean because, if I don't always want pesto. Sometimes I just want a nice clean tomato sauce, or I'll use basil in Italian or Thai curries. So I want, I don't want that pesto parmesan in my Thai curry. Maybe that's just me. I'm sorry? No, you want to make sure that it's bone dry when you put it in the freezer. It does not turn black. And what's actually kind of cool is that it crumbles. So then you have like crumbled basil, and I can just, I just put it in a Ziploc bag, freeze it, and then I can just take a pinch out. You're going to have to, well, I was going to say trust me, but I think I don't want to use that term anymore. It's been co-opted.
So you wash it first and dry it?
Yep, wash it and dry it, and I usually just lay it out, on a paper towel very gently. When you wash basil, you want to just be gentle, because I had a friend over one time and she started washing the basil and she was like massaging it. I'm like, yeah! Corn, I will cut corn off the cob and just pop that right in the freezer. Blueberries I freeze. Actually, I think we need to have a blueberry pie soon because we've got like a gallon of blueberries in the freezer. Yeah, so you can freeze a lot, and for some things like lettuce, you really can't freeze it. But if you wash it and dry it, I put lettuce in I'll put lettuce in a Ziploc bag with just like I did with, this is actually spinach from Farmer Dave, and I'll just put it with a paper towel at the bottom, and that just helps to regulate the moisture. So it gives it just enough moisture to keep it fresh without getting limp, but not so much moisture that it rots quickly. Any others? And I need to be better at self-promoting. So this is a little uncomfortable for me, but there's actually a great chapter in here on storing produce, and it has long-term and short-term storage tips, so freezing and canning. If you're on a budget at the farmer's market, you can ask for seconds. So seconds are basically all the tomatoes and the squash that have bumps and bruises and blemishes that, God forbid, we have a bruised, tomato. But people don't want to eat bruised tomatoes, so the farmers will sell them at a discount. And they're great if you're making tomato sauces or ketchup. I actually make my own ketchup every year. What? Stewed tomatoes, absolutely. Yep. And you can can or freeze. Canning is a pain in the backside, but you don't have to worry about having a freezer, so it's really efficient. All right, so I think we've got a goodly amount of crepes. So I'm going to start cooking the greens. So you can ask for seconds. The other thing is get to know your farmer. If you start talking to your farmer and you're on a budget, he'll let you know what to buy each week, or he'll say, you know what, don't get the strawberries this week. Next week they're going to be less expensive because that's when they come into peak production. Or oh, we're at this end of the season. Don't get that because it's going to be really expensive. If you talk to the farmer, they'll tell you what's going to be the most economical, what to buy, what's the best, what's going to give you the best bang for your buck. In terms of meat, do you guys cook meat? People cook meat at home? Cooking the cheaper cuts of meat. If you learn how to cook the cheaper cuts, you can definitely save some money that way with stews. I got some lovely skirt steak the other day, and that actually cooked really nicely. It cooked really quick, and it's a lot cheaper than tenderloin and T-bone, and it's got a nice flavor. So when you're cooking on a hot plate without running water, Teflon is really good, and a paper towel. Et voila, we have a clean pan. I don't, and not for any good reason. Just, I feel like turkey's honestly. Do I cook with turkey? And turkey is like when you've got 20 people coming for dinner, and that's the sort of. Oh, ground turkey. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll use it like if I make meatballs or, yeah. Actually, you know what?
So you put those greens in that bag totally dry?
No, they weren't totally dry. I mean, if I was more thoughtful, I might have, put them in the salad spinner to dry them. So spinach tends to cook down pretty quickly. But I'm trying to balance the fact that I have a small pan and spinach has big volume, and I want to get as much in the pan as possible. But I don't want to put too much in there because when you're cooking greens, especially things like spinach, they give off a lot of water. And if you cook them at a low temperature, then they give off water and then they end up steaming instead of sauteing. So if you have a nice hot pan, then you can brown them, or not brown them, but wilt them without giving off too much water. So I'm starting with garlic. This is chopped garlic. And I'm going to go in sort of the order of operations of how quickly things will cook. So I'm going to put pine nuts, raisins, and a little bit of curry powder in the pan before I add the spinach. Now the garlic cooks the longest. I'm going to put, anybody allergic to nuts? Because I have a clean pan, I can do some without nuts. Wow, now this is hot. This is awesome. Look at that. Wow. Great. So I'm going to add some raisins, and I'm going to toast those up a little bit in the oil. And then a little pinch of curry powder. And the curry powder just gives it that little je ne sais quoi, just gives it a little something. It doesn't necessarily make it spicy. It just kind of gives it a nice, full flavor. And you can already smell that. gonna add a little pinch of salt.
Garlic and olive oil go wrong.
I know, right? I kind of set myself up for success on this one, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Well, the recipe, it depends if you're making this as an entree or an appetizer or as a side dish. It can serve 4 to 6. It's funny, my co-author Brett is a farmer, and I think he sort of measured one day like how many steps he takes in a day, and I think he walked like 6 miles in one day, just sort of back and forth from da 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 da. And needless to say, at the end of the day, he's hungry. And what I say serves 4 is his idea of like an appetizer portion for 1. So, I can sort of say it serves 4, but, it really depends on who you're serving and what you're serving it with. So the spinach is nice and wilted. No, there really isn't. Yeah, and that's, the benefit of a hot pan. So, and I'll put a little bit here in the crepe. And I'll roll it up. Oh, you guys can't see this, can you? So, could you see that? It's kind of, I've got all my decoration. I was trying to make the table look pretty. Well, So if I were to just serve 1 person, I would cut it in half that way. And, because it's got the chickpea flour in it, it's got a little bit more protein than regular flour and with the pine nuts. So you could serve it like that. And the recipe I call for serving it with romesco, which is a roasted red pepper sauce. But because it's not red pepper season, I'm just using some of the ketchup that I made last summer with tomatoes from the Farmers Market. So that is a chickpea crepe stuffed with wilted greens.